All right. All right. You want to play a Dietrich song while we kind of all, we are on Facebook Live now, at least how it appears. So.
Okay.
Okay, let me try to get situated here again.
Oh, can you hear?
Yep.
Ah, yet such trying times.
Yes.
Yes. Can you turn it up a little bit?
Yeah.
Man I know is falling for me. The man I know is acting like a fool. In the school, as I see, this man I know keeps calling for me. This man I know.
Okay, we are live, we are on Facebook, and welcome to the latest episode of Hollywood Kitchen, where we make recipes of stars from Hollywood's golden age. Today, I have two special guests. My first guest is a German import that we're delighted to have. While this pandemic has obviously been very hard, one of the bright spots is that I met Benjamin online and we've become friends. He is a diehard classic Hollywood film fan, and for 28 years, he's been president of the Marilyn Monroe fan club in Europe. So welcome today, all the way from Germany, Benjamin.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I'm very excited to join your show. And it's like, you know, saying here, it's a very great German-American connection, I think.
It is, and we're gonna make Marlene Dietrich's potato salad, and this is from a German cookbook that had Marlene Dietrich recipes. Benjamin's going to tell us more about that in a moment. And also joining us as well is Meredith Ponedel. She was raised by her aunt Dottie Ponedel, who was the makeup artist for Marlene Dietrich, Judy Garland, and countless others. So welcome, Meredith.
Thank you very much. I'm enjoying this immensely, and I can't wait to taste your potato salad, even if it's a virtual taste test.
I know, we don't live that far away from each other either, which is such a bummer. I wish you could come over and we could just take out on.
I'm on my way, just give me directions.
So what we're gonna do, I thought we'd kind of talk a little bit about Marlene, and then we discuss the recipe, make the potato salad, and then do a lot more talking about Marlene. So that's kind of gonna be the loose format here. Both Benjamin and Meredith, I'll ask you the question that, how did, Benjamin first and then Meredith, how did you each discover the work, the life, the career of Marlene Dietrich? What was your entree into this fabulous world?
Well, I actually discovered her when there was her 90th birthday. There were lots of articles on German magazines and newspapers, and her films were shown on the telly, and I was 14 then. And I thought, I read her name in the paper and I thought, well, this is a very German name, Marlene Dietrich. And I asked my father and he said, yeah, well, she had been emigrated. And I remember the first film I saw with her was Desiree Writes Again with James Stewart, and she was great. And then I really discovered her, and I liked that she was German, and she was, well, the biggest Hollywood star that came from Germany, and that's how it started. And then just half a year later, she died in Paris. And of course, she was buried in Berlin. And yeah, then she came back to Germany, which was very, very interesting. And just a little later, the city of Berlin, they bought her whole estate. And it's in the film museum now. And it's every time I'm in Berlin, I'm going to the film museum to see her collections, because it's so much Hollywood history there. And it's really great to go.
You were telling me they rotate out the collections, so you could go to that museum frequently and it's not going to be the same stuff, right?
Yes, they have it's a permanent exhibition about the whole German film and movie history, television also. And the Marlene Dietrich collection is kind of the center, the heart of it. And they change the gowns from time to time. They have like, I think 6 or 8 mannequins there, and they change the gowns so you can go whenever you like and see different things there.
And Meredith, how did you first hear about Marlene Dietrich and discover her?
Well, as I talked about when my aunt's book was published, I came across her quite by accident. I had discovered a box of photographs in the bar in my aunt's house when I was about 5. I dragged them down the hall to her bedroom because she was in bed, and I started asking her questions about the many people whose pictures were in that big box. And one of them was, of course, and one of the most plentiful was Marlena in these amazing dresses. One actually was with a horse. I loved it. She was dressed up. I forgot the movie. You'd know it in a second. I can't think of the name of it, but she was dressed up in this white outfit, pants, top. I can't remember it, but there was a horse. She was standing next to a horse. So that, of course, I was immediately attracted to that. And it was Dietrich, it was Mae West and Lombard and everybody else, but there were more pictures of Dietrich than anybody else. And they were all inscribed either to my aunt or my grandmother, my aunt's mother. And I just was fascinated by this one person who could wear so many different clothes, have so many different hairstyles, and yet be the same person. So that was my introduction to Marlena.
Excellent. And what, Benjamin and then Meredith, what is your favorite Marlene Dietrich film and why?
Oh, my favorite film is A Witness for the Prosecution, because I think in this one, she's really acting. So like, I also love the von Sternberg films, but I think they were like art. So they really created art, and with the lightning and the black and white movies, of course. And well, she didn't consider herself, I think, as an actress. She considered herself as a movie star. But in Witness for the Prosecution, she's really an actress and acting and extraordinary. And I really like that one. Yeah, that would be my favorite, I think.
Meredith, what about you?
Oh my God, it's hard to pick one, but probably for other reasons, I like Judgment at Nuremberg. Because of Judy in there as well, of course, but I was fascinated by the story. I remember first watching it probably in my early to mid-teens with Dot. It was on TV. And I was just fascinated by the story. And was it a true story? Of course it was. And how come she was denying everything? And you know, and Dot and my dad too, he was there, was explaining the history of the war, World War II, and how they caught them afterwards and what the trials were about. So I was fascinated by her performance. I really, really enjoyed her performance. I also like stage fright. I really like that. And of course I love the von Sternberg movies because those are the ones that Dot worked on.
For me, I discovered her probably in college, and I saw Morocco on a big screen, and just seeing that image on a huge screen is so overwhelmingly powerful. And I just thought she was fascinating, personally, professionally, on screen, in every single way. So I started reading books about her and watching, her films, and she's just a fascinating person. Like, I understand why there's been so much written about her, so many photos taken of her. She's just endlessly interesting.
She was.
Yes, she lived nearly the whole 20th century, and it's so much history. Like, she's from Germany, and she, what I really think is interesting, she was part of the Weimar Republic at the 1920s in Berlin, which must have been so interesting with all the cabarets and theaters there. And then she was part of Hollywood history, of course. And well, she traveled around the world with her touring, her concert tours. So, and in many, many ways, like also in fashion and women's lib and everything, she's a very interesting persona.
And she was so much more than the celebrity she portrayed in the movies. She was such an amazing, well-formed human being. I don't mean physically, but I mean all around. She brought this wonderful European sensibility to this country when she came here. And she just was a very generous, kind, and sharing person, which a lot of people don't realize because, of course, movie magazines of that era show people in one dimension. But she was very much a three-dimension person. My aunt just adored her.
kind of one thing I really try to get people to do through my tours and my online little talks that I do is kind of look at these stars in a different light, because I think so many times they're portrayed as just one thing, and there's so much more, there's so many more layers and so much more complexity and so many different ways of kind of viewing not only their careers, but their lives. So I really try to endeavor to make people take a deeper and closer look.
I got a wonderful letter from Marlena. I had finally found her address in France, and I wrote to her describing who I was and about Dot's book and writing down all her memories. I haven't yet had it published, obviously, because she died many years ago. And I got a wonderful letter back from her saying how much she loved my aunt and she would love to help me, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. Would I send her some of the information? Well, I took too long. I should have just tried to get her phone number and called her, but I didn't. I was too young and too dumb, and I wanted to wait and get everything together. And by the time I did, she died. It was too late, you know, but I do have that letter, and I treasure it. I really do.
Well, Benjamin, let's talk about the recipe. We're going to make Marlene Dietrich's potato salad, and due to the hot weather in Los Angeles, I've been trying to do recipes for Hollywood Kitchen that involve minimal oven use. So this one today requires no oven use, really. And so tell us where this came from, where you found it, and a little bit about the book.
I actually found it in a book. This is the Marlene Dietrich cookbook. It's published in Germany, and it's called Ich will wat Feines, which means I want something good, with its very Berlin dialect. And here are recipes. I also asked in the Marlene Dietrich collection in Berlin if they have really handwritten recipes of her, and they say, no, we don't. There are a few cookbooks, but there was a German cook working in a restaurant in Paris, in a German restaurant, and she read about it in a magazine or a newspaper, and she called and she said, well, this is Marlene Dietrich. And he was like, oh yes, of course, you're kidding. And so he hung up, and then she called again saying, no, I am Marlene Dietrich, and I read you're cooking so well, and I like to order some breakfast. It was, I think, 6:30 in the morning, and an hour later he went to her apartment and brought her breakfast, and he did this cook for her for some time. And the recipes she liked were very German traditional dishes, and they are in this book here. And this is where the potato salad comes from. It's a very traditional German dish. It goes together with like schnitzel, for example.
Yum.
It's easy to prepare, and it gets better when you have it in the fridge overnight. And people, they also have it for barbecue. And I know that some Germans, they have it for Christmas, because Christmas here is at the 24th of December, starting in the evening, and people work, it's a working day until noon or afternoon. And so people make things that are easier to prepare. I know some hated it because they think, oh, that's not festive at all. But others, they say, well, we're okay because we have some more days of Christmas to come. So we're okay with eating potato salad.
Well, it's very refreshing. I've never had German potato salad until we did our test batch the other night. And it's so darn hot out here. It has been for a while. So I ate it the other night, and it was so cool and refreshing and tasty. And I was doing this like, I'll take a bite and another bite and another bite. I'm like, wow, I must really like this stuff. I've eaten a ton of it. So it kind of exceeded my expectations, actually, which some of these vintage recipes, I have to say, have been a little on the questionable side. But this one is really solid. I really think this is a good one. So Benjamin was kind enough to translate the recipe into English for me, which I will post later on the Facebook page. The ingredients we'll need, I scaled mine down a little bit in terms of the quantity it would make. But we have boiled potatoes that are diced, which is right here. Then we have 1 onion. Onions are not really my friend, so I just have a little bit of onion here. So 1 onion, half of a cucumber. The cucumber is really important in this dish. I think it's what makes it have that kind of light, summery sort of texture. White wine vinegar, which we have, salt and pepper. The recipe called for sunflower oil, which I could not find, but I have vegetable oil, which I hear will perfectly substitute. Meat broth, that surprised me, I have to admit. I never heard of meat broth being in a potato salad, but I think it definitely softens the onions, the potatoes, and soaks up the flavor. So now I understand it.
Yeah.
And then 1 tablespoon of clarified butter. I didn't know what that was either until the other day. So I've learned all sorts of stuff in the making of this episode alone.
Yes,
So,
Marlene.
I'll post the recipe.
She loved to cook or to cook with butter. She used lots of butter for scrambled eggs. Her grandson said, well, there was always too much butter. And I think maybe this was because she was a generation where they had a lack of butter. And during the wartime, of course, it was very valuable at that time. And therefore, I think she loved to cook with lots of butter. So, and it's Germany, they say die gute Butter, which means the good butter. And I think that was a generation that butter was a high value.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So you want to go ahead and start mixing it together?
Okay. Yeah, so we have the potatoes. They are cooked and sliced, peeled, of course. And then I think next we can add the onions.
Try to scatter them around evenly in here.
Yeah. And then we have the cucumber.
Then we have the what?
The
Cucumber.
Oh, cucumber. That's right. Okay.
Some they do it with pickled cucumbers. There are different recipes, but this is just the usual half of a cucumber. And then we stir it a bit. Okay, then I think we should add some salt and pepper.
Just kind of do it to our, just eyeball it, I guess, right?
Yes, yeah, do it by eyeball. It depends on how much potatoes you have, of course. And maybe when you have it in the fridge for overnight or for some hours, you will add some more salt and pepper later.
Okay. Makes sense. Pepper's getting in my nose here.
Yeah. Then we have the sunflower oil.
Okay.
Which I would say at least a tablespoon, but I would also do it by eyeball. And then there's the vinegar.
Ah, the vinegar. Okay. I'll put that one out. And then when do we add the beef broth now?
Yes. Yeah, that's the next step.
This isn't fair. I'm starving.
You know what? I can bring you. Do you want me to put this in a Tupperware and bring it to your porch or something? I would totally do that.
No, it's okay. We should have another meeting at Larchmont and have a picnic.
Yes. Well, I'm going to have a lot of this left over between our test run and today. So
As soon as the weather gets better, Carrie, and it's not so smoky outside.
yes.
Yeah, it gets
Plus,
better.
I
I
want to
think
finish your
you can have
dogs. I
it
need
for
some
2 or 3 days in the fridge. So it gets better day by day. So
It really does, because Benjamin and I did our test rehearsal, like I think Wednesday night. And
Yes.
then I started eating this on Friday. And at first, when I first tasted it, it was kind of crispy and kind of a little raw. But after a day or two in the fridge, it was soft. It was the flavor, it all soaked up. So I definitely recommend a day or so in the fridge before you go ahead and eat it. That way it's really soft and it's really, really got all its flavor in full force.
Like a fruitcake.
the potatoes, they will soak all the liquid, and it gets better. I think you should have it in the fridge overnight, or at least for a few hours.
What kind of potatoes did you use?
I use plain russet potatoes for mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think it matters if you use russet as opposed to red potatoes or anything else?
Yeah, sometimes potatoes, they are really like, they are smashing when you cook them, and you shouldn't use that one. So you
Okay.
more like soft ones.
Okay.
And here's
Yeah.
what my final product looked like.
Yum, yum. I'm getting my fork.
And it
And to
says
think-
in the recipe, it says as a kind of decoration or what's it called, garnish, you can have cherry tomatoes on top when it's ready to be served. So,
And to think that my aunt probably ate some of that.
Sorry?
I was saying to think that my aunt probably ate some of that.
Yeah,
She would tell me of the time that, you know, when she was sick, she had a cold, whatever, Marlena would bring a ton of food to the house, you know, that she had cooked.
One of the things Benjamin and I wanted to talk about today is a lot of times when we talk about old classic Hollywood stars, there's a tremendous disconnect between the image we see on screen and the person in real life. And sometimes that caused a lot of confusion for the people in their life and even the star themselves, because again, there's such a difference between those personas. And for all of her glamour and immense stardom, Marlene was kind of a German hausfrau. She liked to cook and clean and take care of people. And that's something that kind of doesn't always connect to people. I mean, I've heard stories about her romance with Jean Gabin, and he really expected the glamorous movie star, and she's in the kitchen, and he was just kind of like disappointed or surprised that she wasn't what he thought. So why don't we talk about the German hausfrau side of Marlena?
Yes, I think it's very interesting. You know, she connected these very different aspects in her life, that she liked to wear aprons, for example, and she liked to be a German hausfrau. Yeah, she liked to be a German hausfrau, and maybe it has to also to do with when she was in America. There was a kind of longing for Germany, and she also had her family in Germany and friends in Germany, and you know, with cooking in German and having the taste of your childhood, I think it's very special. So her daughter writes it in her book that her daughter, she likes American like burgers and something, but Marlena at home, she would always prepare German dishes. And maybe it was also a kind of relaxation for her when she was coming back from the studio, and she cooked. And she was in touch with lots of immigrants, I read. So they're coming from like Germany and France and all over Europe. And she liked to cook for them, and she really cared for people. And so that was the hausfrau side of her, and she liked to clean. I heard stories that she cleaned the stage herself when she was on tour, on concert tour. And yeah, she just needed that to, I think she liked to be in control over things. So like cleaning and cooking, and so that everything would work out properly. And yeah, so that was maybe the daytime Dietrich. And at night she would appear in one of these great gowns on stage and would do her one-woman show. So, and that's interesting of her persona, that she connects both of these sides.
And a lot of actresses today are sort of heralded as being lifestyle gurus, but what people may not realize is that is not exactly a new concept. Gloria Swanson had her own clothing line. She also advocated against sugar and really strict dieting. Joan Crawford had a lifestyle book, and Marlena had a lifestyle book, which Benjamin and I both have. Yeah. Mine is called Marlene Dietrich's ABCs in English, and yours is?
That's the German ABC meines Lebens, which means the same ABC of my life. Yeah.
And this is kind of a really interesting lifestyle book, because she goes literally through the alphabet and has all these different words that she kind of defines what they mean to her. And I found it's kind of funny because there's some of the things in here you read and you're like, oh, that's pretty smart. Okay. And then some you're like, okay. And then others you think, what was she drinking at the time? It kind of runs the gamut, actually. Benjamin, what are some of your favorite passages in this book?
Well, I read about it when it comes to potatoes, as we just did the potato salad. She's writing, well, I love them and I eat them. So sometimes it's very short, just a few sentences, what she had to say. to people. Here she's talking about Rosemary Clooney, for example, and it's all about her life, like about hats. And she ran a beauty column actually after the war, and I think this gave her the idea to put it in this book. And what is interesting about her, she always find new ways to express herself, like beauty columns, and she did radio shows before she did her concerts. And yeah, she had a variety of talents actually. So very interesting.
Yeah, this book's a lot of fun, and I got a first edition. It's not that expensive on eBay, so there's plenty of these kind of floating around out there if anybody wants to read Marlene Dietrich's take on everything from Hollywood to homeopathics to marriage to martinis to massage to nuns to courts. All sorts of interesting things are outlined by Marlene Dietrich in this book. So it's a lot of fun and entertaining. So also one thing is I recommend this book by Marlene Dietrich's daughter, Maria Riva, and this is fascinating. And it's really her perspective as Marlene Dietrich's daughter growing up, because Benjamin, tell us about that relationship. It's very interesting and extremely unusual.
It is very interesting indeed. Well, when Maria Riva, when she published this book, she was on a promotion tour also in Germany, and she does speak German, which is interesting. And she was telling about coming from this Berlin, she was born in Berlin, coming to Hollywood as a child. And when you think how they traveled at that time. So Marlene, she left Germany the night of the opening night of the Blue Angel. And then she went from Berlin to Bremerhaven, where the ship to New York went. And then she was on the train from New York to Los Angeles, and it took her 2 weeks to travel. And her daughter, she's describing when they came to California, because there was no air conditioning at that time, you could smell the oranges. And so it must have been great to go there, and what she all experienced during her travels. And this was kind of a new world, because of course there was no internet at that time, and people in Germany, they didn't know much about Hollywood. They knew the movies, of course, but it was a different country, different language. And it must have been very, very exciting, and to be a part of this Hollywood movie stardom, and she became like this movie goddess. So that must be the work she did with Van Sternberg must have been like magic. So and to witness this as a child must have been very, very interesting.
Meredith, when did your aunt start working with Marlene Dietrich doing the makeup?
Probably around 1930, 31, because I have some very early pictures of the two of them together.
Well, how long did they work together?
Until the early 40s, when Dot left Paramount to go to MGM. But she also worked on Maria, and I don't have them handy, but I do have a couple of beautiful pictures of several actually, of Maria in costume for one or two. Well, she was in, what was it? The
Scarlet Empress. She was
Scarlet Empress. But I also have a beautiful photograph of Marlena and Maria. Maria couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. They were both dressed in identical Hawaiian outfits, the grass skirt, the tops, the ukuleles, the whole bit. And Maria inscribed them to Dot, which is really nice. So Dot did make her up. She made up mother and daughter for the Scarlet Empress.
Yeah.
One thing that always amazed me about this book was her memory. If in fact a lot of these are accurate, the recollections she had from all these decades ago. And also Marlene Dietrich was so involved in the costume and the design of her films. She wasn't just an actress for hire who showed up, hit her mark, set her line, and went home. I mean, she was collaborating with Travis Banton. She was insisting on certain things in the film and lighting and design. And she really was a very full-on collaborator, which you definitely glean from reading this book.
She knew her stuff. She knew the angles, the lighting. She knew how she looked best. She wouldn't hesitate to put it delicately, to make a decision or to make a suggestion to the director. Well, not the director, no, but maybe the lighting guy, the camera guy, maybe change an angle, put a light at a different spot, that kind of thing.
And she changed her look in every movie. She looks different. Like she changed the line of her eyebrows, for example, and the gowns, of course. And she wore those feathers, and in every movie she had a different look. So, and it was all Dietrich. She knew about the screen persona Dietrich, and she knew what the cameraman should do and what the lighting should do. And she was, exactly knew what she wanted.
And I love her films with Ron Stewart. They are my favorites because I think he brought out the best in her. He inspired her, he understood her, and I really think their collaboration was something really special and unique in film history. I have to say though, this book is really, really juicy. And another thing that really stayed with me about it was how she could juggle this many men and women at the same time. Like there's one point where she's got like 6 different past or present lovers in the house with her, not to mention her husband, her child, the husband's mistress. I mean, it's almost like a French sex comedy. It's so outrageous. I mean, the morality notwithstanding, I would be so disorganized. I'd be like, hey, what's your name over there? Can you, I mean, I would just have such a hard time balancing all of that. And she seemed to do it with such absolute ease and precision that it's kind of impressive.
Yeah, and she said when she was asked about this, she said, well, in Europe, we just go to bed with the ones we find attractive. It's kind of normal. So, and she brought kind of this European lifestyle to Hollywood, and she didn't, well, her daughter says that she didn't like to be a movie star. So it was her duty to look good and to be glamorous and everything. It was hard work, and she knew it, and she did it brilliantly, really.
Well, what I've always wondered. Okay, so she married Rudolf Sieber, who was worked in the German film industry very early on and had a child. And it's always seemed to me like that seems such a non-Dietrich thing to do, would be to get married and have a child. But then she never divorced him in spite of having countless affairs with men and women. And they were married like 53 years. So I always wondered why. What was the point? But then what is your take on that, Adrian?
I think they were very close, like close friends. He was a kind of advisor. For example, when she was in Hollywood, she returned at the early 30s to Berlin because her mother was living in Berlin, her friends, her sister, and her husband, he still lived in Berlin, and he sent telegrams. And that was in 1932. It's part of the exhibition actually in Germany. There was a telegram from him saying, oh, do not come back to Germany because Jews of our branch, they go to like Prague and Paris. And she was upset about that because her friends and her family were in Berlin, but he was a great advisor to her. And I think they were very, very close friends. And Maria Reba, she's also saying, well, on photographs, they look like sister and brother. I think this was a kind of a very, very close relationship. Yeah.
Definitely very unusual, for sure. And it's kind of weird the way she raised her daughter because she was more like a confidant and a dressing maid and a sidekick as opposed to, I don't know, it's a very interesting and unusual dynamic, I think, for at least a lot of us to read about.
Yeah, she was really like a witness of this Hollywood history. She knew exactly, well, this hat goes together with these shoes and these dress and everything. And she helped to create this Dietrich screen personality, really. And it's interesting to listen to her stories. When she was interviewed on German television, I could listen to her for hours and hours because what was also interesting. And therefore, I think the book is it's like that because she had a very long life, a very long career, exactly, and such an interesting persona. And there was so much to say about her.
Meredith, what are some of your opinions about Dietrich on a personal level?
First of all, Maria's book is huge. I've read it, but I think you have to remember it's from her point of view, and there's always going to be a different point of view between an adult and a child, even though a lot of what Maria writes obviously came from an adult level as well as she grew up. I I found it interesting that she always referred to Marlena as Marlena and never mom or my mother. So there was like a disconnect there, and I'm not sure why, but I do, from what I have heard from Dot and a couple of others, and Dot was not around when Maria's book came out, but Marlena was a better mother, I think, than what she was necessarily made out to be. She was involved as much as she could be, considering how busy she was, but she was definitely involved with Maria's life. She cared a great deal, obviously. She may not have been Donna Reed because of her Hollywood, connections and her life and the fact that she was so busy. And you have to remember, too, that all of those huge stars back then, Dietrich and West and Lombard, it wasn't just them. When they were starring in movies, hundreds of other people depended on them for income. If they had a tantrum, which they didn't, I'm not saying they did, but if they didn't keep up their end of the bargain, then the cameramen, the producers, the assistant directors, the lighting people, the hair people, the makeup people, they would have been out of luck because their living would have been tampered with. So she acknowledged her responsibility. She felt it very deeply. She was a very generous and caring person, and not one to shirk a responsibility or a contract once she made it.
The thing that's to me interesting about her, and I think a lot of the actresses that had 50-something-year careers, was her ability to evolve. Like, I love the Von Sternberg movies, as I mentioned, but they are capital A.
Yes, they are.
But when she did Destry, that was like such a complete turnaround in her career that was really needed. It kind of took her down off the Von Sternberg pedestal and made her a barmaid in a Western. And
she loved it. She loved it. I have a great shot of her and Dot arm in arm on the set of Destry. I don't know where it is. It's here I don't think I included it in the book, but I have it somewhere, the two of them together.
Yeah, and that really, it showed her sense of humor. It showed a whole different side of her than she'd ever really shown in film before. And she transitioned kind of from the serious artist to being a comic actress on a certain level, to the live shows that she did, to the stage, to so many different ways that she was able to kind of take her talent and adjust to different stages of her life, different audience tastes, and what was going on in the world.
She was the forerunner of Miss Kitty in Gunsmoke, basically. The character Miss Kitty in Gunsmoke, the bar owner, yes. She was, except for the singing, of course, but yeah, she was amazingly flexible in that direction, and that was a great thing.
She was great, I think, in reinventing herself. So, and she came from this Berlin background of the 1920s, where she appeared in cabaret shows and theater, and so she had this stage experience she could use then in Hollywood, like for parts like in Destry Rides Again. She was great. And also when she was on stage in the 1950s, she was like this one woman show she did was great. At first, it was meant to be at the Sahara Hotel just for 20 minutes to entertain people. And then she expanded it to a whole show and a whole evening with Marlene Dietrich. And of course, the gown she had was amazing. Must have been amazing to see her on stage, actually.
Yes. One thing I wanted to talk about, Benjamin, was kind of the German reaction to her, because I've always heard that the Germans felt that, of course, she became an American citizen and she entertained the troops during the war and tirelessly served in the military. And then the Germans were sort of angry at her, but then when she did her stage show in Berlin, she wound up getting, 18 curtain calls? So talk about kind of the relationship with the German people with Marlena during that time.
Yeah, she was very much actually she was one of the first civilians who came to Germany, which was bombed at that time with the American army. She was very much actually she was one of the first. depressing to see her hometown bombed, of course. And when she came back for a concert tour in 1960, she was booed, and there were people saying, "Oh, Marlene, go home," and everything. But she always said, well, it was the press, the public, the people, the audience, they liked me. And I think maybe it needed another generation to rediscover her. She came back in her death. She wished to be buried in Berlin. And I remember these scenes when the coffin was brought to the cemetery on a car. People were standing on the streets and applauding and throwing flowers onto the coffin and say, well, thank you, Marlene, danke, Marlene, adieu, Marlene. And some were standing on their balconies having signs. And so maybe it needed another generation like to rediscover her, what really she did. And also for Germany, she wasn't anti-German at all. So she knew what was going on from a different point of view, because she wasn't in the country anymore, but people like her husband, they told her what was going on. And yeah, she could have done better. And she said in the documentary by Maximilian Schultz, she said, well, it was no choice. When you knew what was going on in Germany at the time, there was no choice which side to choose. And she was really a brave woman, I think.
I really admire how she really sacrificed really to entertain the troops and do what she did, because she could have just stayed here in Hollywood, and that's okay too, and done the Hollywood Canteen, which I think she did do. But I mean, she was over there like on the ground with troops, and she really, I've heard her daughter say that she kind of came into her own when she got involved with the military. That was like her real happy time for her, and she felt like she was finally in her element.
Yes, she said, and she always said that afterwards when she did concert, she said, well, my boys are in the audience, and which were veterans and which were like grandparents, grandfathers at that time. But she was, that was, I think, a really intense experience for her. And she suffered from like pneumonia, and it was cold, of course, and there was rain, and it was not a movie star like living in a hotel. She lived in a tent, and she sewed her dresses herself and everything. And she always said, well, I'm a practical person. And I think coming from this Prussian background in Germany, maybe she thought it was her duty to do this. So, and it was an amazing experience for her, I think. And going back then to Hollywood was like, well, I think she didn't like that. So care for clothes and lighting and camera and everything. So that was kind of a going back she had to do. And then she reinvented herself, of course, doing these one-woman shows. Great career.
Absolutely. And luckily, since we're all still in this pandemic situation, there are a lot of great books on Dietrich, including the one by her daughter, and also a ton of DVDs. I know Kino Lorber has released several of her films recently on DVD. I think there have been new versions of Destry, of Song of Songs, of, oh shoot, I can't remember, a lot of them. And also, I have to plug, this is such a great box set, and I'm not getting paid to say this at all, but this is a fantastic box set. This is all of the, let's see, okay, 6 of the movies she made with von Sternberg, and it is the Dietrich and von Sternberg in Hollywood set by the Criterion Collection. And this is so, so good. This is like one of the jewels that you want to have in your DVD collection, because these movies are just fantastic, and they truly are works of art, which didn't always happen at Hollywood studios. Sometimes they came out as art, sometimes it was sheer product, but these films are truly timeless and just beautiful to look at.
I have another book I can recommend. It's just was released, I think, 2 months ago, which is called Dietrich Between the Covers by Michael Michaud. And it's all about these, he collected all the news, like these great arts magazines from the 1930s. And it's done very well researched. So for example, all of her radio shows, which is really known, are listed here, and you can find lots of pictures and everything. It's very, very interesting. And it's quite new, and I can highly recommend it.
Did you get your copy in Germany or did you get it from
No,
Hollywood?
it's in English actually. I bought it on the internet, and it's yeah, you will find it.
Okay, I'll have to look that one up. And Meredith, do you have your book handy that you can plug for us?
I can go get a copy.
Sure, why not?
It's in my room. Hold on just a minute. I'll be right back.
Why not?
Well, do you know that her name actually Marlena, it didn't exist. She invented it herself. Her real name was Marie Magdalena, and you can see it in the museum, like her old school paper books. They are there, and that you can see how she practiced her handwriting and her signature. And then it was she shortened it to Marlene, which is now a common female name in Germany, but at that time it wasn't. So she was very much ahead of her time and really a trendsetter in many ways.
Do you have your book?
Copy. This is Dot's book, which is called, what's it called? About Face, The Life and Times of Dottie Ponedel, Makeup Artist to the Stars. And here is one of the pictures, one of the photos that Marlena inscribed to my aunt, along with the photo of my aunt's house that Marlena was in, more often than not. And interestingly enough, I was just requested about a week ago by Angela Lansbury to send her a copy because she was so nice to me when I was first doing research on Dot's career. And we had a wonderful conversation. So off it went in the mail to her last week, and I'm hoping to hear good reviews from her.
Excellent. Well, Benjamin, do you have any photographs or items of Dietrich that you'd like to show us?
Oh yes, I have some autographs of her actually, and this is an early one, and I think she liked to inscribe with green ink.
Yes, she did.
Yeah, from Berlin, and this is like the pre-Blue Angel look. So that was 1920s Berlin. Yeah, and this of course is.
I need to admit she made a silent film, but she totally did do silent film.
Yes, that's an interesting story. You know, she thought, well, of course, Garbo and Gish, they did silent movies, but she didn't. And when she came to Hollywood, she was asked, well, how do you like the films of Greta Garbo? She said, well, yeah, these are very good films. I watched them back in Berlin when I was a child. And actually, she was 5 years older than Garbo was. So she was very witty about this. Very, very interesting, yes.
I go to the San Francisco Silent Film Festival every year, and one year the centerpiece of the festival was a Marlene Dietrich silent film. And they gave away bookmarks that was Marlene Dietrich, and it says San Francisco Silent Film Festival. The poster and the program also had this picture of her from a silent film on it. So I kind of laughed thinking how mad that would probably make her today. She's a poster person for a silent film event.
Yeah. Yeah, she was a starlet really in Germany in the 1920s. She was well known, especially in Berlin. But well, nowadays you can think of it, but when she did the Blue Angel, she wasn't starred in the film. It was an Emil Jannings film and done by Van Sternberg. And then she stole the whole film, of course. And she made this great career out of it. Well, this is of course, very well known from the Blue Angel. And it said that, well, I was in Berlin 2 weeks ago, actually, and did a tour around the Schönebeck area where she was in clubs and celebrated. And there were also clubs for cross-dressing people who like to dress up. And it is said that she got the idea for this Blue Angel costume and also for the Morocco back in Berlin in the 1920s in these clubs, which is interesting, of course, and must have been a very crazy, weird time, and so interesting to think of it.
Excellent. Do you have any more stuff to show, any more Dietrich photos to show us, or?
Oh yeah. Well, I also liked. This is also in the museum. This is republished, of course, at Blue Angel with the Feathers, which was very naughty at that time, I think. And I also like that she did these great adverts, like for soap.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great one, I think. What else? Well, this is when she started her one-woman show at the Sahara Hotel. They did postcards,
Mhm.
and that was these great dresses, of course. They were, and in these days they didn't have the fabrics, the material. It went, every little sequin was sewed on for, and it was great what she did. So she was very much ahead of her time, I think. I once saw a documentary that she wanted to have an illuminated dress, which weren't possible at that time, but there was a correspondence between her and Jean-Louis, and she, well, after decades, they created this dress, what she invented. At that time, it wasn't possible, but so she was very, very much ahead of her time in many ways. Very interesting.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. Do either one of you have any final thoughts on Marlene that you'd like to share before we go?
Not really. I think, what Dot once told me, she thought she could make chicken because of the war and being deprived, especially back in Germany. She said Dietrich could make chicken 150 different ways out of necessity. And she loved her chicken soup. We'll have to try the chicken, maybe find the chicken soup recipe sometime.
We got a lot of this we could do, Benjamin, though. So this is
Dot said she loved her chicken soup. In fact, Dot, I didn't include it in the book, but Dot actually, in her original manuscript, she wrote down what she could remember of different people giving her information. And one of them was some kind of a pie. I believe it was a chicken type pie from Dietrich, and something about the crust, and it's written down somewhere. I'd have to look it up, but I didn't think that needed to be included, so I didn't put it in.
Understandable. Well, there are a lot more good recipes in that book, Benjamin, that we could maybe do in the future.
Yes, absolutely. They are. This is really traditional German food. You know, I know my grandmother cooked it like that way, and my husband and I were enjoying it. And this is really worth looking up. And yes, it's a kind of like vintage cooking style. So I will make some more out of it. It's very, very interesting.
I would love that. Well, I'm glad this pandemic has made us friends, and we've connected and gotten to spend time together on Zoom. And Meredith, I will bring you some potato salad when we log off here. Let's arrange a get together with your dogs, socially distant, and I will have some potato salad in a nice Tupperware thing for you.
We will have to go have another meeting and visit all the kitties.
Yes.
I'm sure they would like potato salad too. So
awesome.
that would be great. We could have a picnic.
Excellent.
I think that's a great thing.
Thank you both so much. This has been delightful, and there will be many more. I'm working on lining up a lot of different episodes, so stay tuned for more from Hollywood Kitchen.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.